Now that we know how to manipulate arrays, I want to talk about something else we're going to often do with arrays, which is run some code for each item in the array. So imagine if I really do have a list of to-dos and I'm trying to print them to the screen. I would want to go through the entire list, get the text for each one, and use console.log to print it, or later on, use different JavaScript methods to render it in the browser. Either way, I want to go through the list of items, running some code for each. This is known as looping, and with arrays, we have a method that makes looping over our arrays pretty easy. We're going to mess around with this over in the notes.js file down below. The method that we'll be using to get this done is called for each because we do something for each item in the array. We can access it via notes.forEach. It is a function, so we will call it as such. The for each method takes a single argument, and this argument is actually a function. So in the past, every time we've called a function, we've passed in argument values like strings, numbers, booleans, and objects, but we can pass anything in as a function argument, including arrays, which we'll see later, and in this case, other functions. So what we're going to do is call this method for each, and we're going to pass to it as its one and only argument a function. Now there are two ways to get that done. We could create a variable like const do this equals a new function, and then we can just reference the do this variable right here. That would successfully pass a function as the first argument, but there's no need to define a variable just to use it. So what we're going to see a lot in this course is us just directly defining the function right in line, which means right here, we're going to use the function keyword. We're going to open and close our parentheses, and we're going to open and close the curly braces. This function is where we define what to do for each item in the array. Now, this function itself is what's going to get executed one time for every item in the array. So if I have 2 items in my array, this function will get called twice. If I have 15 items in the array, this function will get called 15 times. And we can prove this with a quick console.log. Let's just console.log, a couple of hyphens, or maybe the word testing 1, 2, 3. We can save the script and we can run it to see exactly what happens. Over in the terminal, I'm going to run it. That is node notes.js. And when I do, the first thing we see is testing 1, 2, 3, printing 3 times. Why 3 times? Because we have 3 items in our array. So we've never seen something like this before, passing a function into a function. When we do this, we're creating what's known as a callback function. So a callback function is nothing more than a function that gets passed to a function. Now in this particular case, you'll notice that we're never calling this function that I have highlighted directly. Instead, we pass it into the for each API, and in that code, that is where it ends up getting called. Now in this case, this function that we've defined gets called, and we've already proved that. We see the message printing 3 times, but it also gets called with some arguments that we can access in our code. We get 2 arguments. The first argument we get is the individual item. So we're running the function 3 times because we have 3 different items in the array. We can access the individual item here, which we'll see in just a second. Let's go ahead and do that instead. Right here, instead of printing testing 1, 2, 3, I'm just going to reference the item argument. Let's save the script and rerun things from the terminal. When I rerun them, what do I get? I get my 3 notes printing. I get note 1, note 2, and this is now the new note 3. So this is great. Not only can we do something, run a function, one time for each item in the array, we actually get access to that item so we can do something specific to it. Alongside of the item, we also get the index. So this is the position of the item in the list, and we could print that as well. Let's go ahead and print that first. So right here before this line, I'll console.log the index. Now we should see the index followed by the individual note. If we rerun the script, that's exactly what we get. The first note has an index of 0, and we get that note's text. Then we have 1, the note text, and 2, the note text. So using for each, we're going to be able to do something meaningful for each item in our array. And this is probably the most common array method that we'll end up using throughout the course. Now it's your turn to use for each on your own. Over inside of the to-do script, what you're going to do is replace this line right here with a for each method call. So on the previous line, we print how many to-dos you still have to complete, and that's fine. We're going to leave that in place. But what I want to do down below is print all of the items left to do. So instead of just dumping the array to the screen where we actually see the array data and the quotes from the string, we're going to have a nice printed list like we had here, but with real data. So what I want you to print is something along the lines of the following: 1 dot, and then it would be the first item, whatever that happens to be. Then it would be 2 dot followed by the second item. And obviously the first item and the second item are going to depend on what you put in your to-dos array. For me, after these changes, the first item would be clean kitchen, and the second item would be do work. So go ahead and actually use for each to print a little message like this. Make sure to get the numbering correct and make sure to also include the text of the to-do. When you run the script, you should see all of them nicely formatted in the terminal with the message up above showing you how many actually exist. All right, take some time to knock this one out using what we just learned. Pause the video, test your work, and when you're done, come back and click play. All right, how'd that one go? Hopefully you were able to get that done without too much trouble. We're going to be using for each here since we want to do something for each to do. That would be to-dos dot for each. Now we know that for each takes a single argument to function, so we're going to create that function. And we know when this function gets called, it gets called with 2 arguments. We get access to the individual item, so I could call that the to-do or the item, whatever I want, it doesn't matter. And then I get access to the index. And we're going to need both of these. We're going to use the index to set up the numbering, and we're going to use the to-do to print the to-do. Now, right inside of here, all we need to do is use console.log to print a template string. We could also calculate the position first if we wanted to. So I could say something like const num equals index plus 1. We start at 0, but we want to start at 1 while we are displaying it to the user. So we add 1 to it. And then we could console.log our template string. We are going to start off with the number. So right here, num. Then we're going to put a dot space. Then we're going to put the actual to do. So right here, to do. And there we have it. That's all we have to do. Now we could even move this right inside of the template string. I could add index plus 1 right here, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it as a separate variable, though honestly either way gets the job done. Now that we have this set up, let's go ahead and remove the comments down below and actually test our work. I'm going to save the to-do script, use clear to clear the terminal output, and use node to-do.js to run it. When I run the script, what do I get? I get you have 4 to-dos, and I get my 4 to-dos. Number 1, clean kitchen. 2, do work. 3, exercise. And 4, buy coffee. So there we have it. Using for each, we were able to print a nice list of all the stuff left on our plate for today. Now that we have the challenge complete, that's where we're going to stop for this one. But I do want to take just a quick moment to recap. The only method we learned about in this video was for each. And the reason that I wanted to spend just a bit more time on this one, especially by itself, is because this is the first time we're ever passing a function into a function. When we pass a function to a function, this is called a callback function. The term callback function just allows us to better talk about our program. It's just how when we add a function as an object property, we call it a method. You could still call it a property and you wouldn't be wrong. The word method is just a bit more descriptive. Same thing with a callback function. We're still passing in an argument. It just happens to be a function. Now, in this case, we saw that our function got called one time for each item in the array, and it got called with some arguments. We got the individual item as well as the index. Now, for each is not the only array method that's going to use callbacks. As we'll see throughout the rest of the section, almost all of them will. We're going to continue messing around with arrays and building out our 2 projects in the next video, so let's go ahead and jump right in.